Several movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe (MCU) have evolved and changed over time thanks to further developments within the timeline. Since 2008, the MCU has released an impressive 36 movies across phases 1 to 5. With such an impressive catalog of stories, there are bound to be developments and changes that impact how the movies and characters are viewed. And while many of the films that hit differently on a rewatch come from the Infinity Saga, there are several recent releases that include transformative reveals that make it even better on a rewatch. Speaking of the Infinity Saga, the crowning jewels of those stories are the final two Avengers movies, Avengers: Infinity War and Avengers: Endgame. These titles saw the heroes face off against the Mad Titan, Thanos, in what would be a definitive turning point in the saga. Watching these movies for the first time is incredibly compelling, but knowing exactly how Infinity War ends does not lessen the intensity and power of the film. With Thanos winning, the heroes stare on, unable to do anything as people begin to fade from existence. It was harrowing as an ending the first time around, but on a rewatch it remains deeply moving, and for that reason it earns a spot on the list. Next up, Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2 sees Peter Quill reunited with his father. As luck would have it, Quill learns that his father is a living planet by the name of Ego, and Quill has actually inherited some reality-bending powers thanks to his heritage. However, later in the film, it's revealed that Ego is not only responsible for the death of Quill's mother, but he was also the one who hired Yondu and the Ravagers to kidnap him as a child, and he now wants to take over the universe and harvest his son's power to extend his reach. All in all, Ego is not winning any Father of the Year awards, but knowing that Ego is a much more nefarious character the dynamics of the film. Quill's desire to connect with his father becomes pitiable, and Ego becomes downright detestable. Into the Multiverse Saga, where Kang was initially set up to be an overwhelming threat to the heroes of the MCU, and above all others, Kang the Conqueror was meant to be the greatest and most terrible variant in the multiverse. While Kang and his variants had popped up in various places before Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, this film placed Kang squarely as the primary antagonist of the piece. So, of course, there was speculation about how he would win and escape, but the movie subverted expectations and had this ominous powerhouse lose to arguably some of the least powerful heroes in the MCU. It's not a slight on Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne, but Kang's sudden demise really alters the stakes of the entire piece. Thor. Ragnarok changed the narrative when it came to Thor, who was proving to be a challenging character to slot into the MCU. With a brighter, goofier, and looser approach, Thor became much more relatable, and he experienced some major moments of growth. In this film, Thor reconciles with Loki, and they face off against their tyrannical sister Hela together. However, Asgard is lost in the conflict, but Thor manages to save many of his people on large spaceships, evacuating their former home. But the biggest changes to this film's perspective actually come later. In Avengers: Infinity War, Loki is killed, many more of the people of Asgard are lost, and it picks up very shortly after the events of Ragnarok. That means that despite his best efforts, Thor loses almost everything to Thanos after defeating Hela. Tony Stark remains an integral part of the history of the MCU, with Iron Man leading the charge and setting up the MCU and his debut adventure having Stark abducted by members of the Ten Rings terrorist group. His story was bound to intersect with the group and its leader, the Mandarin. And in Iron Man 3, it seemed that this was exactly what was happening when Tony went up against a mysterious figure who went by the name of the Mandarin. However, as of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, fans are now familiar with the actual Mandarin and recognize Trevor Slattery as an actor who was hired to be a scapegoat. This twist went a long way in making the movie more dramatic, and while the truth is now known, the enjoyment of the piece remains high. However, it does alter the way the story plays out on a rewatch and where the tension of the piece lies. Chadwick Boseman did an outstanding job playing T'Challa in the MCU. However, the actor tragically died in 2020. After inhabiting the role and setting the character up for success in the MCU, Boseman's passing changed the course of these films. Not only was the sequel heavily altered, and the mantle of Black Panther passed down, but the plans to have T'Challa cross over and collaborate with other heroes were no longer viable. All of this goes into making the first movie a much more melancholic watch, with the character's success underlined by his imminent demise. Spider-Man: Far From Home was one of the most emotional movies from the MCU, with the hero returning after the blip, only to lose his friend and mentor Tony Stark in the following battle in Avengers: Endgame. Far From Home picks up shortly after these events and sees Parker mourn the death of his dear friend, only to be manipulated into giving up his last gift, the Edith glasses. But Mysterio's deception is not the only big reveal in the film. After Spidey manages to take down the con artist and illusionist, he finds out Mysterio has one last trick up his sleeve, revealing Spidey's true identity and making it look like Parker was responsible for the attacks in London. But Spider-Man: No Way Home manages to resolve that major stumbling block with relative ease. Thanks to Dr. mastery of the mystic arts, Peter is able to go incognito once again. Unfortunately, there are major consequences for Peter's meddling with the world's memories, and several visitors from across the multiverse on Earth -616, including some variants of Peter Parker himself. However, once again, the movie has an even bigger and more harrowing reveal at the end, when Peter Parker tells Doctor Strange to make everyone forget him in order to correct his previous mistakes. It's heart-wrenching, and the amount of twists and turns can only be experienced at full tilt on a first watch. Captain America: The Winter Soldier is often hailed as one of the strongest entries in the entire MCU. Steve Rogers, the leader of the Avengers, leads this action-packed movie with espionage and deception at its core. But what proves absolutely devastating is the huge reveal that his former best friend and ally in the trenches from decades earlier, Bucky Barnes, is somehow still alive and working as an elite assassin for the bad guys. Add to that the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. was actually infiltrated at the highest rungs of the organization by dozens of Hydra members, leading to a hostile takeover, and the film becomes an outrageous series of shocking reveals. Finally, a movie that lied about its own name: Thunderbolts. Most MCU properties follow their titles, but Thunderbolts led to a big twist in the multiverse saga, The New Avengers. This stunning turn was well concealed, though speculation had been going around that this was not actually a Thunderbolts team. Regardless, the fact that the movie was able to toy with audiences and lead to a satisfying big reveal makes this one impossible to watch the same way on a rewatch. And it sort of seems like the MCU is enjoying playing with audiences in ways that make these stories infinitely rewatchable.